Hey, my Pontiac High School people. Last few lessons, we've been looking at the Bill of Rights and their construction and what they mean for us. But now we're going to be looking at the expansion of rights throughout American history. In today's lesson, changing the law of the land. As you know, our laws, our Constitution can change through the amendment process. And after the Bill of Rights, we have had 17 more amendments. And a surprising number of those have been focused on expanding the basic rights of American citizenship to more and more people. Now, these changes have arisen because the ideals of our nation have evolved and have grown over our 200 and some odd years since we were created. And as those values changed, our laws changed to reflect those. Most notably, for today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the expansion of freedom. We're winding back to 1787 when the Constitution was written. The only citizens who were guaranteed the right to vote were white, male landowners over the age of 21. So we weren't really looking at a full inclusive democracy here. You had to be white, male, you had to own land or substantial property and be over the age of 21. That was simply not that large of a percentage of the American population. We do improve over time, and today, anyone born in the US or naturalized can vote once they're 18, but these changes did not happen overnight. Let's look at how they evolved. For about 100 years after independence, most African Americans living in the United States were living in servitude. They were enslaved individuals. Now, many of the framers of the Constitution, the people who'd sit down and created our nation, didn't like slavery. Thomas Jefferson, drafter of the Declaration of Independence, hated slavery, had originally wanted to outlaw slavery right back in 1776. But just like we had in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, people were afraid that southern states would reject the Constitution if the Constitution tried to outlaw slavery. That if we tried to outlaw slavery, we would pretty soon find ourselves without a unified nation. And unity was more important to the framers than this issue. Now, the 13th Amendment, all the way in 1865, is going to finally correct the problem of slavery. This is the final year of the American Civil War. The issue that we had been afraid would divide us, we were afraid slavery would lead to a civil war right from the beginning, finally did in the Civil War. So what's there to be afraid of anymore? Let's just go ahead and outlaw it. So in 1865, the United States finally got the guts to do so and passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, outlawing slavery. But this amendment did not guarantee other rights to the former enslaved population. That loophole was exploited pretty quickly. The slaves had been free, but many states denied them citizenship. They said, all right, you're free, but in order to be a citizen of our state, you have to be white. All right. Well, we got to fix that problem. So the 14th Amendment to the Constitution clarified for everybody that any individual born in the United States is a citizen and cannot be denied the rights of a citizen. This was very important to the enslaved population at the time, and is very important to many Americans today, particularly a group of Hispanic Americans who are recent immigrants. If their parents crossed the border, it doesn't matter if they did so legally or illegally. If the child is born in the United States, 14th Amendment, any individual born in the US, they're a citizen, and we have citizenship rights. That all ties back to the 14th Amendment. But those pesky Southerners, despite the 14th Amendment, some states continued to deny the right to vote to African Americans. They said, all right, fine. They're not enslaved, and they are citizens, but, and they put all kinds of rules in place to keep African Americans from voting. So we have the 15th Amendment, which states that a person cannot be denied the right to vote on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. That is, you cannot say that they're not allowed to vote because they are black, or because their skin is dark, or because they once were a slave. Those are no longer conditions that will be allowed in the United States. All right. 1964, we have the 24th Amendment. The 24th Amendment tries to fix another problem that was put in place. Many states were trying to limit the vote of some residents by requiring a poll tax. A poll tax is a fee to vote. That is, if you want to go cast a vote, you have to give money in order for your vote to count. These schemes are put in place mostly to deny poor people the ability to vote. Because if everybody has to pay the same fee, let's say it's $20, well, $20 to some people is not a whole lot of money, where $20 to others is feeding their family for 3 days, right? So you got to make sure that everybody has equal access to voting. And the 24th Amendment does so. It outlaws the use of poll taxes. There was actually an interesting case recently in the Supreme Court where the 24th Amendment was put in place. People had to have a voter ID. They had to have an ID in order to cast a vote. And there was a fee for that ID. Well, lawyers cited the 24th Amendment and said, if you're making people pay for an ID and they have to have their ID to vote, then that is a poll tax. And that was struck down. All right, women's rights. The traditional view of women in America, this is like way back 1700s, is that they are inferior to men. And that because of this inferiority, believe me, if you know my wife, you will know that women are not inferior to men in any way. In fact, I am a subspecies of her. The inferiority of women in this traditional view meant that they should not be allowed to vote or hold political office. But there was a strong push that became much stronger in the late 1800s when women like Susan B. Anthony really led this national fight. They weren't initially successful, but by 1919, the opinion of Americans had changed. Throughout World War I, women had really stepped up, played some really important roles in American society, and showed everybody that they are not inferior in any way to men. And really helped to change the opinions of many people in America, notably the President of the United States. And in 1919, we had the 19th Amendment, which expanded the right to vote to women. The last one that we have to talk about is the 26th Amendment. In the 1960s, the United States was drafting 18-year-old men to fight in Vietnam. A draft is when somebody is told that they have to fight. So you don't get a say in whether or not you go off to war. You have been drafted. You are a soldier. The problem was that federal law only guaranteed the right to vote to people who were 21 years old. So we had people who had no say in the American government. They didn't like the draft. They did not have the power to vote to get rid of the draft. And yet they were being drafted to fight. And people looked at this and just said, wow, this is really not fair. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. We either need to not draft people until they're 21, or we need to lower the voting age. So in 1971, the United States decided that if you're old enough to die for your country, you're old enough to vote. And the voting age was lowered in all states to 18 years. So today, in the United States, anyone who is born in the U.S. or naturalized may vote once they are 18 years old. That was the expansion of American right to vote through our history. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you learned something, and farewell.